I'ma get medieval on your ass.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Getting Medieval. And this is going to be a weekly show based on Lord of the Rings or anything dragons or any kind of sword or sorcery we want to come up with. But I don't think we're going to get into that Dungeons and Dragons, though. You've got our guest, Dr. Brentley, that you've seen him frequently pop on shows with me all the time. In fact, we do too much stuff together. We are co-business partners, co-writers, done a lot
Why
of things.
not this?
It might as well bring it in. And of course, just so you understand that there's the greatest Star Wars podcast on the actual YouTube. It's a Sorlac Digest podcast. But Darth Moocher is a man of many different talents, one of them being Lord of the Rings. Welcome,
Yes.
Darth Moocher. How you doing, brother?
Thank you, guys. This is great. I'm a little disappointed in the Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe as this progresses, we will get into it. But yeah, I'm doing great, man. Thank you.
So, in other words, you can find him over on the Sorlac Digest podcast YouTube channel. Very great channel. You guys normally stream on Wednesdays, and
Yes.
we pop on some shows on Wednesday, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But this will be a mainstay for the Shadow Nose Network channel. So Darth Moocher will be over here, and you'll see my face over there on the Sorlac Digest podcast channel too. So
Yep.
For this show, we're going to run it, and guess what? Our guest is going to be the actual moderator. So I pass it over to you, Darth Moocher.
All right, guys. Well, Getting Medieval. Of course, we're starting with Lord of the Rings, right? Lord of the Rings is in the news. It's in the now. It's happening. We got season 2 of Rings of Power. I don't know about you guys, but I'm having a blast with this season so far. I love season 1, and what we've got, even in the 4 episodes that is passed right now, I'm ecstatic. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I'm a huge Tolkien fan. It's more like a life journey because it's almost like a study that you have to do. There's so much information out there. I don't think anybody has a very distinctive pinpoint on what the entire world is built off of. So as I'm viewing this Rings of Power season, I am seeing some liberties being taken, but also it makes a lot of sense, but also very close attention to lore. I feel it's a very close attention to lore. How are you guys enjoying this season compared to the first one?
I think
or are
it's
you
actually
disappointed?
better. No, it's great.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
the opening of this season, just like 10 minutes of Sauron's backstory. I was like,
Yes.
whoa.
Yeah.
I did not know I needed this, but it was beautiful.
I did not expect it either. Like, I thought we were just going to jump into this, whatever. I mean, we're getting some. What I like about Sauron in this one is that I always grew up knowing that he had this master plan, but no, he's actually vulnerable and making this plan, not as he goes. He does know what he's doing, but at the same time, he's finding weaknesses in every race and every opening that he's building this thing. So it's maybe almost like working better than he thought. And I think the show is gearing towards that. So Alex, how are you enjoying this?
You know what? I think it's better than season 1.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at, there's out of all the 3 of us, I'm the novice Lord of the Rings fan, but the Ring of Power has actually got me more into Lord of the Rings than anything else.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a story, it seems more entry level in the same way a la The Hobbit. If you don't really understand by the time they make it to the Fellowship of the Rings and that, this will kind of guide you in it. And I thought they've done a great job. The action's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love the scenery. Yeah. It's amazing. The digital effects that they're doing. I know
we're where the budget is, man. Yeah.
Yeah. We're used to Weta doing a lot of work, but whoever's doing the work on this show is making it all the different realms and places all look equally different. Yeah, I love the way they've kind of drawn the viewer in, and it seems like a big budget film.
Yeah,
on a small screen.
Yeah, no, the production value is there. So know where the money's being spent. It is I can understand if there's a lot of comparisons online, right? There's a lot of people we love the Lord of the Rings film. So do I love the Hobbit films. Yeah. Anything Peter Jackson touches, is gold in my opinion. I mean, I even got Dead Alive tattoo on my arm. That's, you know, one of his. But you know, but at the same time, I was like cautiously nervous when Amazon announced they were going to do this, and then I'm like, okay, Rings of Power, okay. Because the second age is where this takes place, and the Lord of the Rings takes place in the third age, right? It was that whole thing, and there's like 1,000 years different in this whole span, and I understand like the show is trying to condense a lot, and I think Peter Jackson even said it at one point, was like, to try to do the Silmarillion proper. First off, you can't, because it doesn't read that way. It reads like almost like the Bible, where it's like story, you know. So I feel so far that they've done like a fantastic job, and I know that there is, you know, people out there on the internet is the internet, of course, you know, we deal this with Star Wars all the time.
Change.
Yeah, I mean, for example, the orcs in the orc family that they showed, okay, a lot of people lost their minds.
Oh, of course, I heard that.
Because they're going by, like, again, what Peter Jackson set up, and some of what Peter Jackson set up was not gospel. It's like he made up some of the rules of how orcs are made or breed or whatever. Like I said, he took some liberties, and it works. It's great, because in that setting it works. In the Rings of Power, just to use this as an example, they showed an orc family, and they showed that there's almost like a humanizing touch to them, which and that's where I was kind of like, be careful, don't humanize them too much. They're supposed to be the evil race, and this is who Sauron corrupts, and they're afraid of him. That's why they follow him, you know. But there has been some writings in the Tolkien, you know, from his letters and stuff, that he explained that some orcs were corrupted men and elves, and some were bred from the earth and swamps and all that stuff, and they also bred just like their predecessors, you know, so men and elves and everything. So it makes sense. Like I said, it's not black and white, but they took some liberties in the show to be like, all right, well, we're interpreting it to where orcs could breed this way, you know.
But now here's the thing, though. Within every part of writing, no matter what you're doing, it's never like you're getting off the page word for word verbatim. Number one, I think that it would be, even in if you look over the Game of Thrones, that's not word for word verbatim. There's a lot of changes in the writer's room when it comes to the screen, and I think for people to look at this like Peter Jackson is gospel, well, that's wrong, because if you're going to do that, then there was an animated show way before Peter Jackson came around. So if you're not going to hold him to that same type of level, then why hold Amazon to it?
Exactly. He took a lot of liberties, and so was Amazon. But again, the works of Tolkien, he didn't get to finish everything. You know what I mean? His son came over and he put together Silmarillion to the point where it was publishable and all that stuff. And there's still a lot, burning questions like crazy. So I just want to throw that orc thing out, because that's like the big thing out there, right? People are taking those small segments out of the show, and they're making their own. Like you said, Peter Jackson didn't say this, and so unfortunately, there is that divided fandom where they hold the Lord of the Rings movies at such high esteem, which I do too. But then Rings of Power comes in, and they kill it. I'm sorry, they absolutely kill it. Again, season 1 set it up perfectly. I thought the whole Mount Doom transformation to Mordor, or the Eastlands to Mordor, or Southlands to Mordor. That's not written, but again, it just made this epic story. It's exactly what Peter Jackson would do. Like, he really would do that, and I thought it was absolutely perfect. That's why I say in this series, in this season, Sauron's looking at this like, all right, well, there's Mount Doom, we got Mordor here, and we got the orcs, and we got Adar, and and he's like taking this master plan, and it's coming to him as every episode we get. And Dr. Brantley, you're 100% right. That intro that we got for Lord of the Rings, because again, we were promised more Sauron in Lord of the Rings too. Like, we were gonna get more. I'm like, all right, let's come on. And the whole 2 episodes of the first of the season was him. You know what I mean?
And also just an evil that you cannot kill. Right? It's like, you tried, they did their best, and he just slithered underground, waited a little bit, tumbled down a mountain, and like taking in the people and the horses and all this other stuff to create flesh again is like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
it's the
American meet
details.
him and he still survived.
Yeah. It's those little details. It's those elements of, like, one, when you're setting up something like this, your main villain
Yeah.
has to come over like he is an undefeatable villain. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
far, they have done it. And to tie in, and like I said, we'll ask the editor to throw a spoiler alert at the bottom if you haven't watched the first season. But
Yes.
to throw in everything at the beginning of the second season and
Yeah.
ride you through how the first season took place
I love it.
into the second season
Yeah.
was like, wow. I was like, it was like,
Look,
the
man.
minute
Yeah.
that you sit around and you look at the brilliance of that writing, you're like, bravo. You guys are just tearing it up. And
Yeah.
Sauron doesn't look like, look, he's undefeatable. Now, of course, obviously, unfortunately, due to the Peter Jackson films, we know how this journey ends.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's still amazing to see him at his prime. That's
Yeah.
something that we did not get to see in any of the Peter Jackson films.
Yeah, what we're witnessing is the prologue to the Lord of the Rings movies. That
Mhm.
5 minute, with Galadriel's narrating, and it's this whole thing, and to find out like how Sauron was the right hand captain of Melkor,
Yeah.
and how he survived, and then he tried, and like I said, in this one he tried to take, like, kind of continue it. Then the orcs turned on him,
Yeah.
and that dying breath is when he felt, and like I said, his essence, because he's not. He's the same race as what Gandalf is, like that.
Yeah.
Those he's not a wizard, but he's like a demigod or a, I forgot what they call him, but he's in that same kind of race. Like I said, you can't just stab him and kill him. He
Yeah.
could have died. He could have died right there in the intro to this thing. Like that could have been it from him. But he did that whole explosion, right? He did that
Mhm.
force whatever he is, and like melted in that goo, and his essence was remained. And we know that now, like later on, that he pours his malice and his spirit into the ring, the one ring,
Mhm.
and he can only die when that's done. So I love, like I said, I love the vulnerability that they put into
I
him,
did.
that he's not just kind of like steamrolled over everybody and does his master plan. He's got to create these manipulations and secrecy and deceivement and all that stuff, and it's great how they're doing it. Like I was so happy that they brought us back, that flashback on the sea where he was when he was
Exactly.
shipwrecked, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, here we go. Like someone asked me, goes, I have to revisit season 1. I said, great, but you don't need to, because they do a great job of explaining. Because at first when I saw that, I'm like, well, how did he get there?
Exactly.
Like, yeah. And knowing that's him now, and I love the fact that we know it's him. I love the fact that we as audience do not guess. It's we're seeing it through his eyes and his actions moving forward, and it's the characters on screen that are, figuring it out, and like, oh my God, getting in a danger. I actually find that a little bit relieving as a viewer. You know what I mean? So we're not second guessing on who's who.
And I will give them one aspect as well, is that for some reason that they've done this a little bit better than I thought they came across in the Peter Jackson's version, is that Sauron almost has a humanistic quality to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's certain moments where, as a trickster, like you really think that he's a very good character and that he's better than what he is. And even when he's on the boat for starting of season 2, he's talking to the people, and it seems as for about a moment that he really has a connection with the man that told him, hey, let's go to this other land. And then you just see the evilness turn into it, and you're like, wow, man, it's like,
Sauron's power, his I guess if he had a special trait, a special ability, he is able to see within somebody and their desires. So he knows how to take that and manipulate it to his will. You know what I mean? So like he goes to Galadriel, he goes to everybody, and he creates these things by giving them what they want, but also like it's fantastic character. And again, I'm glad that we're getting more of him, and we're not done with him, because there's a lot more to happen.
And I also think it's very interesting, the shifting of the two different actors.
Yes.
And again, there's a great way of explanation why, one, normally they kind of dance around that, and they sometimes will just like throw it in like, oh, you look a little different or something. And they just blended it in such a way that it is
Perfect.
extremely believable to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I thought the same thing with the head of the orcs. There's different actors that
Adar,
they have to do, and I give them credit for, like, other people would bring it up and they make it obvious. They just was like, let's just flow in, let's get it gone, and you don't mess with the flow of the show in any way. So,
I find that kind of continuity perfect in movies in general, where it's like, especially with somebody like Sauron, where he's a shapeshifter. Like he comes as Anatar. He comes as when he visits Numenor, he comes as somebody and a different elf. He's a werewolf or a wolf at one point in the books. You know what I mean? Like it's a perfect villain. To me, he's one of the perfect villains. You know what I mean? And the way how things progress, and are you guys always looking at it too, though? Honestly, like, you're watching Rings of Power, are you kind of like looking into the Lord of the Rings movies and kind of find in your own kind of like continuity and overall world building aspect of it all? Because I tend to, it's almost like I'm trying not to, but it's almost like it's hard not to.
Only on some of the characters that transcend, like Galadriel and Elrond. Those were the only ones, and they did a great job of casting these people to have a very similar look to the characters that Peter Jackson did. But it's so well done, in that you can take all these little bits and put them, do your own headcanon or see how it's going to connect. But
I mean, we're gonna see Galadriel go from a warrior to a sorceress. Like, we're gonna see this transition. And the last episode that dropped, I think they did a great job of her and Elrond button heads. He's just like, you're obsessed, and she's like, I can't. That's my whole life. She was there when Melkor was defeated the first time. She was in those battles. She's been this warrior, and now she's got this ring. And now we're gonna see this transition of her going from, like, again, more sorceries, more in that the Lady of the Woods kind of stuff, right? But we get into Peter Jackson stuff. That's gonna be interesting. That's why I'm like, I know they kind of stated 4 or 5 seasons, like, total. They have enough, and they need to see it through. They have to. Because what's coming out or what happens to a lot of people. Oh man, it is brutal, but epic, and I feel this production company won't hold back. You know what I mean?
And I think that part of it, their deal was that they had to commit to 5 seasons.
Oh, yes.
So it's like, no matter what, you're doing 5 seasons. If you run out of money, the last one has to be shot on a camcorder or whatever. You still have to, you still have to do it.
I love it. I love that commitment, because in today's age, we get too many of these where, like, studios are scared and they drop. Especially in the Star Wars world, they get scared, and we'll never get those again. Maybe in a comic book or whatever. But it is funny to see the internet kind of divided a little bit. Like Lord of the Rings fans and scholars, people study these films and the writings. That this is a whole world building thing. It's not. It goes beyond fantasy sometimes. Like, so we're doing a fantasy podcast, and these tropes and these character lines come up in a lot of fantasy. That the hero's journey comes up a lot, and Tolkien was very, very smart to follow it and to invent it as he goes too, and inventing these things. When the Silmarillion was writing this, was afterthought from The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. He built this world after. And if anybody doesn't get a chance or has a chance to read the Silmarillion, try to. It's a
yes. I will say try to, because I bought it. I tried, and I just, after a while, it's just like you're not getting characters. You're just getting descriptions of things that happen.
It's not a linear story.
Yeah, it was very difficult.
It's taking character and giving their story, and then you get like these cross things, and I think that's where, like, shows like this and Peter Jackson thrive, because they took appendices and everything, and they're like, oh, let's put this and make it a huge plot point, right? Like Arwen and Aragorn wasn't even in the books; it was an appendix. You know what I mean? It was like it was an appendage that it was like one paragraph that they had a love relationship, and Peter Jackson made it a plot. And I love that these shows can do that. So Silmarillion almost reads that way, where it's like, okay, let's take this and then here, and then let's put together a linear story.
Yeah. And I like the way that the internet has been a tad bit divided on the one aspect is that you're not supposed to treat the Ring of Powers like Peter Jackson's Fellowship.
Yes.
It's something different. Now I understand, it's the confusion that I always get is that it's Lord of the Rings fans fighting Lord of the Rings fans. Like, okay, wait a minute now. It's not like it's Dungeons and Dragons or Game of Thrones fans. It's like you guys are all the same fandom.
Yeah,
and so
it's different interpretations.
They're giving you more of something that basically ended like more than way over a decade ago. So if you're getting an extension of something, be happy with the product that you're getting right now.
Yep. And that's why I brought up the orcs in the beginning of this, because that is a divisive subject amongst people, how they interpret it. And again, it was a letter that Tolkien wrote that kind of had that little verb. And I take it all as canon, like whatever he said.
Yeah.
In a letter, in a notepad, and whatever. I'm like, the thought was there, and it's not clear. It's not a black and white decision to make. You know what I mean? And you could kind of be loose with things, as long as the overall story gets through, which I think it's happening. I think you can do this. You can take those leaps and liberties with it. You know,
there's also it's an interesting thing you can do with the different ways that they're being birthed, because you can have them, like the ones that come from the earth can actually have a different desire than the ones that have a family. And that can be something you can do things with,
and they kind of did it, right? Like the orc had the family, was hesitant. Do we have to go to war? You know what I mean? And then there's the ones that are just like, and there's orcs that are just like, war, let's go, like the Uruk-hai, let's go. And like I said, they are the main villains of this. They're the villain race, and you can't humanize them too much, but you can give them that hierarchy that they deserve. Like you can give them a little bit more orc lore, because there's very little of it out there in the Tolkien works. They're just a race of evil beings that just do the biddings of Sauron and Melkor and all that stuff.
But now I think with the diversity of characters, especially within the orcs, and I think you can show a little bit of humanistic qualities in them.
Yeah.
Because to have something purely evil just going around tearing up something and everything, there's no real story behind that. There's no real motivation behind it.
Right.
You need fraction, because you never know if you're divisive writing. Maybe there's some infighting. Maybe, you never know where that would work as a story that works as something.
Now, the orcs never followed Sauron out of loyalty. It was always out of fear. And if you're falling out of fear, that means you have some sort of self-preservation in your in the race or whatever it is. So you know what I mean? They were loyal. They liked Adar because Adar was one of them, and he's bringing them up and saying, I created Mordor. Now it's the Eastlands is your South. I keep saying Eastland. Southlands is your home now, and we scorched the sun, and this is your thing for that purpose. And the one thing I want is the one scene. It was in the first episode of this one where oh God, what was Sauron as a human?
Halbrand.
Halbrand, thank you. He turned himself in or whatever, and he had him, and the orc had him on face. It's like, swear to Adar. He says, I swear to the leader, or the one who reigns over Mordor. And that smile, I'm just like, perfect, because we see these things that Sauron does. Where when he created the first 3 rings, he never touched them, right?
Yeah, never did.
When we ended the last episode, or one of the episodes where it was the rings for the dwarves, he grabbed them and he threw them in himself, and he put his power over them, and that's a huge difference between why the 3 elf rings were never captured. Like when we fast forward to the Lord of the Rings, they were never captured, but they could still, he still had power over them, and this is why. Again, they're very smart. I was watching some interviews on the creator himself, and they're very, 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 very smart, and they're very respectful to the writings and the everything of it, and that's why I kind of like frown upon the infighting a little bit because I think a lot of people do it just because, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, Amazon, they're gonna ruin it. It's like, well, I mean, give them a chance. You know, like
initially, though, I'll be honest with you. When I heard Jeff Bezos, I was a tad bit worried in the beginning.
Me too.
And I was like, I gave him
a chance, though. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the kind of guy you thought, like, well, he's not Hollywood, and he wanted so desperately to be Hollywood. So you're like wondering, like, if he could do it right. That first season was like, okay, look. Regardless of what he does at Amazon packaging wise or whatever, they do a great job with this show, and they've proven not just this show. They have some other hit shows on Amazon Prime that are fairly good as well. So they're starting to round it out now.
100%. As long as they keep that respectable idea around certain IPs, like you spend $1 billion on this IP, do it right. I think the show itself was budgeted at $1 billion, right? Like they put $1 billion into creating Rings of Power,
So I actually did a little bit of a deep dive into this.
Oh, good.
The rights, $250 million to the estate.
Wow.
So that's without shooting anything. That's without hiring anybody.
Wow.
Just for the books.
$250 million right there.
And it's not the books. You get the appendices of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and like the Silmarillion, I think.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So then they are spending about $50 to $60 million an episode.
Wow.
Okay.
Again, it shows.
Yeah, because they look as good as any major impact,
100%.
better than a lot of motion pictures left out today. So
no,
and I'll tell you right now, note to Dr. Brentley, make sure our heirs is doing a really good job if we pass away, man, because getting it from Peter Jackson and New Line Cinema to Amazon too. Wow.
Yeah. My apprehension is the same thing where it's like, all right, well, they're making Rings. I was so excited just to have anything Lord of the Rings back in the fold, right? Because I'm such a fan. And Peter Jackson kind of was like, I don't want to do it, especially like going back to it's just so much work, it's so much dedication. And he's probably thinking that same thing. I don't want to spend 10 more years on Middle Earth. I really don't. The first scenes, the first clips that I saw, I was just like sold, like, because that's that first impression. When you had Galadriel and her brother as young kids, and that scene, everything was, this feels so cinematic and respectable and epic, just like the Peter Jackson films. We're in for a great ride. Exactly. You know what I mean? And I know that we're being positive because we're fans. We like it. And I think it's a good show. And I think being positive about a good show is important. You know what I mean? I don't want to, like I said, put the, some comments in the description or down the wheel. If you guys, what your thoughts on it, like, are you not happy with it? Are you happy? Or you think it's being handled with respect, or are they really just torching this whole IP? Which, again, I'm going to go on a limb, and you can blame me, but I think they're handling it with very good respect. Yeah.
Well, so in just about every episode so far, there's been a number of moments where I'm just like, oh my god, I that's amazing. There's so much stuff like in, let's see, what was it, it was the horse in episode 3.
Yes.
The horse. It starts with the horse, and the horse kicked everybody's ass.
Yes.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. And you saw Sheila as a baby spider or a middle-aged spider, and it was confirmed that's Sheila. And I'm like, those little deep cuts and those Easter eggs. That's what makes it. That's what connects the world itself, from what we know to what this is. And I love that. I absolutely love it. Yeah. The horse. Lord of the Rings is great at giving characters to those, like, certain animals and certain things that you wouldn't expect anyway. And I thought it was great. Of course, Isildur is not dead. I mean, we all knew that, but he could be in peril because he's a pinnacle part of this whole thing to the end. No,
a lot of great characterizations. Like I said again, I love how, every land looks different. It's not like you're rolling through this part and that part, the same kind of rehash. There's just a little intricate details that they put out throughout the series. And one of the aspects that I thought, and the same thing too, where people fail to realize is, if you compare it to Game of Thrones is very slow. It
Yes.
takes
Oh,
off
yeah.
and everything.
Well, it's one
Everything-
subject, you know. It's yeah.
But you know, when you start in their seasons, it's always this slow build up towards this. That
Yeah.
is not the case with the
Baby
Ring of Power.
steps. No,
They
yeah.
started off season 1 and you were immediately going. Season 2, they've done it, you're immediately going. It's like you're not sitting and waiting for this giant buildup because, man,
Yeah.
you're riding in it from episode 1.
Yeah.
You're like in the thick. Second one, episode 1, it's going. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Give me the action, give me the story, make me like get off my seat for
Yeah.
episode 1 instead of doing it, waiting for like episode 10 to do that to me.
Yeah. It was.
yeah,
It was. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, in the pilot, you know, you're starting off with Galadriel climbing a mountain, and you know, with all the elves, and having this great fight scene. You know, it's like,
Yes.
oh, this is awesome.
That, like I said, that season 1 had this great build up to what the goal was, and then introducing Halbrand and all these things, and then like you discover him at the end, and at the end of season 1, they actually have rings of power in their hands.
Yes.
And then to 4 episodes into, or 2 episodes into season 2, we've got more rings of power into the dwarves that are coming.
Exactly.
The men are net. I mean, it's like, okay, because that is, and that's where my appreciation was going, because again, they give this great foundation, and then all of a sudden we're getting into the meat and story, because again, the Rings of Power, even though it's titled that, it's a small portion of what the entire, until we get to that prologue.
Yeah.
Because there's, again, I don't know how they're gonna do it, but we'll see. And I'm excited to see how they're gonna do these battle scenes, and some, like I said, some characters die, and I'm not gonna give anything away or any spoiler, but there's some really brutal stuff coming. Sauron is you're gonna hate him, but you're gonna love to hate him. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna, and he should be, right. He's a villain.
Exactly. That's we should have that build up. We should want to see, and let's be honest too. If you watch episode 1, they kind of show a lot in, like, you know, what's going on in the season.
Yeah,
and you see that, you know, this season is going to be way different than season 1. There's a build up to a lot of bad things happening before the end of season 2.
Like you see,
and
the
best thing we know is we're definitely getting to season 3. We don't have to guess.
Yes.
We know we're getting.
Well, like Brantley said, I didn't know that they had, like, it was it was in the contract, and that makes me feel better, because now
they wouldn't.
I'll know.
They said they wouldn't do it unless they
that.
made this commitment.
See, that's what we want that's what we want in production companies. So, like, anybody who's complaining, like, oh, they won't, it's like they have to, like, they're going to do it. You know, it's just, you know, eat more vegetables so we can live longer to see it. That's all. You know what I mean?
Because it's going to take 10 years. It's 2 years between the first and second season. So 5 seasons going to take 10 years.
Yeah.
Which you can kind of understand why, you know, there's actors. I think sometimes as actors, you're happy to get a role and you needed that role then. But then the commitment phase of what this whole situation is. Number one, being down initially in New Zealand for season 1. Now they're up in London for season 2. So it's a little bit different. But that's a commitment on its own. If you're an actor, even if you're an American actor or you're a European actor, that's hard alone. But then to think that this is a 10-year commitment to you.
Yes.
That's where, like I said, again, I think we will see some changeovers other than probably the main 2 or 3 characters that are like, no, we're going to pay you to stay. You know?
Right. Oh, this is going to be your legacy now.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that said, now there is kind of a, we've been talking about this, like, kind of like pre-show and stuff, was like a little bit of a change in the way Amazon is promoting this. And there's one glaring thing that it's the commercials in between. I thought it was like, what do I, like, did I subscribe to something I shouldn't have, or what? And now that you said that was a kind of a change that they did, I don't like the commercials in between. I'm paying for this already. Like, you know,
well, they got to make their money back. They just spent $1 billion.
Yeah, they do. I mean, yeah, you're right. And
it's like, hey, I'd take
rather
your money, please.
Yeah, I'd rather see it before, like, because I'm looking at these are like an hour 10, hour 20. I'm looking at they're mini movies. You know, they're like movies from the 80s, right? You know, 90 minutes or whatever. So, and I look at it, so, okay, if you want to put commercials, you could do it before. That's cool. But sometimes it interrupts that flow where it takes me out of the out of Middle Earth just for a second, and I have to do the count. It's like, okay, that's 40 seconds, and I'm like, I'm not watching these commercials anyway. But that was a change in this, and we'll just deal with it because
I will give you credit on that one as well. I thought that, first of all, it's like, we can compare it to the same services, kind of like a lot like Disney. I don't know how you have like Amazon. I can give them a little credit. Disney, I'm wondering, like, you have decades worth of television production, and their AI system doesn't understand how to put commercials in without interrupting major scenes.
Beats, hit those beats, right? Exactly.
On Amazon, I think it's like, when you look at it, you started everyone off with no commercials.
Right.
And then you changed it in the midst of everything. And you told people, like, here's the choices you're going to do, and you can pay higher for it. People's like, it's not worth paying higher for more free packaging to watch several different shows. But the one aspect that I give them is that, like, the first episode, they ran it exactly. Here's some commercials, and we're going to run it uncut. Right. Okay, fine. And Ring of Power is the kind of show you do that with. You say, hey, thanks to whatever limited sponsor this is, we're going to run this hour show and everything, but you're going to have to sit through 60 to, maybe 70 seconds of commercials. I'll take that.
But now that I know it's a norm,
but don't do it at a point where it's like a character's on the edge of a scenario, and then they cut it, and you're like, wait a minute, what just
choose Colgate for your fresh breath? It's like,
well, that's
it kills the flow.
That's the thing about being very involved in the IPs we love. If it's Star Wars, if it's Lord of the Rings, if it's Harry Potter, whatever it is, we're watching this not just to do a podcast. We're watching this just to watch it. We're actually like fans of it, and we're living through the Middle Earth along with this, right? And so when you do that, again, marketing, whatever it is, that would be my major criticism to them. But again, I'm looking at it as an art form, and they look at it as a business too. When it comes to that, not the creators, but the who makes those decisions. If it's Bezos himself, like, put commercials at 35 and 60 minutes. No matter what's going on in the show, we have to, because the retention has to be there. But that's a little bit disruptive in this viewing. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's funny. I hear no complaints on the internet about that. They're just worried about baby orcs,
and you're like, there's plenty of moments that are down times, like when you have the Littlefoots, and there's a certain moment, and there's a slope, and you're like, boom, this is the right time. But literally, there's like a spider going in the cave, and then it's like, boom. And you're like, oh no,
what happened? I can say, what happened?
Like, and I understand. Look, I think there's a generation of people that don't know how to watch any form of anything with commercials, because we kind of spoiled them too. And now it's there. These companies are now deciding that the old way used to pay for shows.
When TV was a thing, right?
Yeah, it's like, my God, commercials paid for this stuff. Well, you didn't now just come out of our pockets. I do understand it. I can understand a tad bit of frustration. And I think maybe this is something that they may clean up. I'll be surprised if the last two episodes they run in the same kind of way. I think they'll do something in the beginning and just to not knock the flow of the last two. But the episode 1, they did a fantastic job with it.
As long as it doesn't get worse next season, like every 15 minutes, sometimes like TV movies, they draw it out to 3 hours.
Well, let's be honest. It's not like Jeff Bezos ain't making the money. Come on.
Richest man in the world. God. I mean,
it's like, come on, bro. You really don't need commercials. Let's be honest.
He's got the Ring of Power.
It really does, and he sells that ring for $29, free shipping, overnight shipping. When we're talking about like how the Silmarillion reads, the show kind of does that too. When in a good way, though, this is the good thing. I think when it kind of it does that Indiana Jones map and kind of like brings it out and then goes to here and then brings it, and it really shows you where we're at and the map of Middle Earth, and I absolutely love that. Like, I thought that was a great way to do it, because again, when I was even when the Lord of the Rings movies are coming out, and Peter Jackson there was a picture of him, and he had the Silmarillion on his desk, had all these tabs, and this was after the Hobbit. He was doing this thing, and we're like, he's gonna make it, he's gonna do it, but then how? Like you really go, there's a
Mhm.
story there, but it's always the story that leads up to the events of what we saw. You know what I mean? And yeah, so I love the way that they're setting up, they're teaching us about Middle Earth by doing that little
Exactly.
map, in and out, like I said, Indiana Jones, traveling here and traveling there and
The
changing the
coolest
landscape.
thing was in this last episode 4,
Yeah.
where they were going to the orcs, and then they showed the path of
Yes.
destruction
Yeah.
through
Yes.
the forest. It's not just a little line or anything. It's like, oh no, they're doing this and making the trees
Yeah.
angry.
And making it, dude, talk about, okay, that's
That was
another
so
thing.
good.
The Entwise, we got Ents and Entwise.
Yeah.
This again, as there's a complaint I heard, I go, well, they're breaking this whole continent. I go, no, this is thousands of years or 1,000 years
Mhm.
before they
Mhm.
lost the Entwives. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
in Return of the King, they lost them there. This was great. I loved it. Sometimes it throws me off when everybody speaks English. You know what I mean? So when Treebeard, he was the only one speaking English to everybody, and then all the Ents were like grumbling. I do like that better, right? Like more languages. It puts me in. But again, very nitpick but to know that they were there and we get to see them for the first time, I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic.
Well, here's a question I'm gonna pose to you. Do you think that Peter Jackson is watching this? That's the thing that comes through. Do you think that
I
he's
hope so.
actually taking
Like,
the time to sit and
look,
see what the competition's doing?
If he's really that big a fan, I'm
Yeah,
sure he is.
yeah.
Because I mean, that's an hour out of his day, once a week.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's probably interested.
If any of them, Peter Jackson, yes, because again, he's such a huge fan. And again, I hope he is.
Hope he is too.
I would really love it to hear an interview of him, what he thinks of it too. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
that's where I was going with it, Dark.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
you definitely, because I think it would ease the pressure off of Amazon, and people would then start saying, well, if Peter Jackson enjoys it,
Seal approval kind of thing.
then
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like a passing of the torch, same way with the Olympics. You give it to the other city or something. Peter Jackson would be like, I passed the torch over to Amazon, and don't worry, we're going to get it back in December, and then we're going to get it back in 2026 with the.
But on that note, on that note too, do you think these two new productions that are coming out, is this an answer to, like, here's my Lord of the Rings, and is this I hope there's no divide. Like, I would want one big family, but is the War of the Rohirrim and the Search for Gollum, are these his, because Peter Jackson's involved in both producing, and Andy Serkis directing Gollum? Is this his answer of that, like, we're not leaving this, this is still our kind of I hope it's not that vindictive, you know what I mean? I hope they can, because I think there's room for it all. I really do. Yeah. These are two ages of Middle Earth, you know what I mean? And we'll get into the wizards here in a second, but besides like using each other's character, well, Elrond and Galadriel, right? But I think there's room for it, you know what I mean? So I hope my hope is Peter Jackson and the companies that are doing this, if they're doing it because there's more story to tell, but also like, hey, this is a support system, so we live in the third age and we can live in the second age. You know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing. If Lord of the Rings, let's say the Amazon series is not doing well, and let's just say that it's terribly tanking and something goes wrong. Like, if you're Peter Jackson, and the common sense is not to think that this may have actual dire consequences on what you're doing, you're crazy.
Right.
Because whenever you devalue something, it works on other parts of the franchise, whether it's you're attached to it or not. So he should want to see Amazon prosper.
I agree,
because it will lead into his films. Because look, I the War of Rohirrim. I've looked at the animation. Now that's going to be polarizing for some people.
Yeah.
Some people love anime, some people don't. So if the Amazon series is doing well, maybe that propels itself in December and gets your series to do quite. So I hope they're rooting for one another.
Look, fans, we're going to see it all. So
The main thing is it's two different companies and they
Yeah.
have rights to two different things.
They
So
do,
Warner
that's-
Brothers
yeah,
is going to
yeah.
make as many Lord of the Rings things as they
Oh, yeah.
can because they've got the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit minus appendices.
Right.
They got Amazon has the appendices and Silmarillion. So
Yeah.
you know, it's like they have two different things to work from.
Yeah.
And hopefully, it's not into like a, oh no, this is coming out and this is gonna compete against it. It's like,
I don't
no,
want
you got to work together.
Yeah, I don't want it to compete. And again, I see it as one big world. And when I was asking you guys, are you having a good or difficult time kind of putting that in that world, right? As one cohesive, as a fan, I am. I'm trying to put it all, the Rings of Power, into the Lord of the Rings, into the new productions that they're doing, and I'm here for it all. And that's where I was like, because again, these are two different storylines. They can't conflict with each other. The only thing that can conflict would be the use of the wizards. That's how they're doing it. I know the Rings of Power has we know they're the Istari or the I forgot again. I should write the names. Lord of the Rings names are all over the place, but the Stranger and the Dark Wizard that's in the East, right? So you got those two. We know they're wizards. We know they are. And then there is some discrepancy on the time frame because the show's telling it like kind of leaning like the Stranger is Gandalf.
Yeah.
Not Sauron is or Saruman is not he's not the other guy. Even though he's kind of similar, he's like because different. Saruman is he wasn't a bad wizard until he got corrupted by the promise of the ring. Like, oh my, the ring is being found. But there are some discrepancies on if that is Gandalf. That is kind of lore breaking, okay? Because in the lore, the two blue wizards were in the first age or the second age, and they had a role that plays in the Melikor's or Sauron's first defeat. When I was researching this too, because again, it was a weird time because in the Silmarillion, I think they got the two blue wizards that were there at this time in Lord Rings of Power failed in their mission, and they really had no elk, but they did their own thing, and they both ended up in the East, which the show is. They're both in the East, the two blue wizards. But then Tolkien wrote that no, they actually did have a hand in the uprising on certain battles that are happening to defeat Sauron, the first of when the Isildur cut the ring power off of Sauron. So if the Stranger ends up being Gandalf, it is lore breaking. My theory is it's not Gandalf. It's going to be the two blue wizards, and then we have our three Radagast, Saruman, and Gandalf in the Peter Jackson's proper, because that's in the lore. That's how the time frames that they were sent in the
so Gandalf and Saruman were not in the Second Age.
No, they came into the third age as Guy and Radagast to Guy and help the events of, because Sauron was still in power. He wasn't dead. The other two blue wizards were sent in the first age to aid Middle Earth in the rise of Sauron the first time.
Okay.
So that is something that we'll have to pay attention to. Now, them going into the East, the Strangers in the East and that Dark Wizards in the East, I was like, oh, that could mean that they're the two blue wizards. There was in the last episode, the Harfoots, right? Nori was saying, hey, we need a name for you, right? And she was spinning off names and names and names. I'm like, here we go. And then the Stranger said, look, names find you. We don't pick our names, And I was like, there he goes. They're being smart about it. You know what I mean?
Very good writing.
Yeah. So that's something to look forward to or look at. Now, doesn't mean that it doesn't take away. I don't think it takes away from him not being Gandalf. If they use it, okay. I guess the question is, people that are really dedicated to that, like I said, that continuity and that lore, it ends up being Gandalf. Would I be disappointed? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
I'm not.
In Lord of the Rings, though, he is killed and comes back as Gandalf the White. So is that something that maybe he didn't talk about, but could be, this is sort of a before and gets reincarnated as Gandalf the Grey later on.
I mean, that would be brand new. That would be a brand new thing. And also, I think there was some talk about like, okay, if it is Gandalf, maybe he started his journey earlier on and didn't get involved in the whole Sauron thing until Lord of the Rings properly, right? But again, when he met Tom Bombadil, the stranger did say, like, are you going to teach me these powers so I can help stop this? Is it all on my shoulders to stop this evil rising? And so again, there's some now on the surface, it probably doesn't matter. It really, if it ends up being Gandalf and it's probably great story and everything, but then there's those deep divers, those scholars. And again, watching these interviews from these guys, these creators, and they're very, very keen on the lore and everything. They're very smart not to do something that lore breaking. You know what I mean? Unless it serves the story, the whole thing. And I really do feel that they're respectful enough. You know what I mean? And very well could be the two blue wizards. But again, there's so many hints and directions and similarities that the stranger is Gandalf. To follow your nose, the everything that's happening. I'm like, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it. Would I be mad? Probably not. I'm because I'm in on it.
You never know through the agreement. Maybe Gandalf might be off limits to him, and this particular part of the story as well. So we don't know what they've gotten their rights to totally on some characters. We know there's some interloping characters that he probably can use, but or
and that was a thing too.
A spin that we're just not expecting.
Yeah. Like I said, it could be leading in one direction. Where you know what, you bring up a good point, Brantley. It was the two blue wizards were kind of lost in the fray during the Lord of the Rings. Even the books, they knew they existed, but what if one of the blue wizards died and became Gandalf? Like that would be something that was invented, but also never black and like, and it was never
contradict something.
It would add to it. Yeah, it would be like, because it would like, no, that didn't happen, but it didn't happen and it did not happen. If that makes sense, like it wasn't confirmed or denied that can happen, since he was this recurring character that came back again as the White, right? That took over Saruman's place. Like, I'm everything Saruman should be. You know what I mean? That's why he came back as Gandalf the White. That would be an interesting twist to it. Again, it would get people up in the uproar, but again, it was never confirmed or denied that can happen. The two blue wizards were lost in the books of Lord of the Rings. Because I say the books because I did hear that like Peter Jackson didn't have the rights for the Second Age stuff, right? Besides the prologue. And that's why in The Hobbit, when Bilbo was asking how many wizards are there, there's 5 of us, and he's like, there's Radagast the Brown, Saruman the White, and he goes, and the 2 blues, and he goes, I can't remember their names. And I heard that was a way of Peter Jackson say, he couldn't say their names because he didn't have the rights to use them.
Exactly.
So it was like the 2 blues, and so interesting, right? It's
very smart.
Yeah.
I have seen the creators of Rings of Power talk about, like the Second Age is like thousands years of time.
It spans a broad,
So what they're doing is, it's like, if we actually did it in the timeline, we would have these characters and then they'd all die, and then we'd have these other characters, then they'd 100%. All die, and then we'd have these characters and they'd all die. So what they did is just compress it, so
they did.
All these characters are living at the same time, and all of this stuff is going to happen in probably a 30-40 year span or something.
Because Isildur, we all know that he cut the ring off of Sauron during the last battle, and then he took it for himself, and then it betrayed, and that's how Gollum got it. He's a Numenorian, right? So they live 300 years old, 290, 300 years old. That's their age, because they were blessed by longevity, because the elves, the whole island is a whole thing. And you'll find this out as the show comes, because there's a huge plot point on Numenor. You know what I mean? A lot of people, I heard it was boring. It's not going to get boring, trust me. But so when they saw that, I go, okay, he's probably in his 50s right now. On it, he doesn't look it, because Aragorn was 90. In the cutscenes of Lord of the Rings, there was a cutscene that he explains that he's a Dunedain. That he's they have long lives. So you have to figure out. It's like, okay, well, like you said, they're spanning this whole thing where a set of characters could be reset, and Isildur could still be alive at the time where he cuts the ring off. You know what I mean? And yeah. So, but knowing that the stranger was born at this, I mean, like, you know, a week ago, and then we have the events he got like in the time frame of the Rings of Power. It's interesting, and again, I'm not mad at that if that's what they're doing, and especially if they do. So if it came about where it's like, okay, we're gonna take the two blues and they have their own conflict and their own thing going on, and then he gets reborn as Gandalf, I wouldn't be mad at it. I really probably wouldn't. And then you could say like, well, that's why Gandalf doesn't remember them because he was, you know, because remember he didn't even know he was Gandalf. He goes, Gandalf. Oh yeah, that's what they called me. You know, like there was that.
Yeah.
You know, memory lapse. You know, it kind of it can work. You know what I mean? And
I think so, and I think they've got to do something maybe to rile up the actual fans to tune in a little bit more. There might be some things just thrown in that might be like, okay, wait a minute, hold on, I got to see this just for this, you know, because again, there's a standoff between this, like, no Peter Jackson, no Amazon. It's like, no, it's
they're always going to be those people that compare it. They're always going to compare it, and they're always going to, you know, have the conflicts within each other like that, instead of like sitting back and watching this world unfold. Like really, the Middle Earth is huge. And
I will say the one thing that I know you asked earlier about the comparing it to Jackson, the only aspect that really for me it's kind of brought up is because Peter Jackson's ring is so iconic in the Lord of the Rings films, and these I'm like, it just doesn't have the same kind of like, you know, importance to me, kind of, because the one looks like it's one they got from K Jeweler and some other ones. Like, This doesn't remind me, and it's such a simplistic ring, but yet iconically, I think if you see that, I know some people have like, you know, the ring and a necklace or something, and they're like Lord of the Rings fan. Like you just, that's the only thing for me that like whenever I see the ring, it's like it doesn't seem like the ring, but you know, give it some time, it'll work it through.
Now, Darth Moocher, I have a lore question about the dwarf rings, because that's never talked about in the Lord of the Rings movies. So what happens to them? Because we see the elves still have their rings. We see the humans, the Nazgul, have their rings.
They get turned into the ring race.
We don't see any dwarves really.
So in the appendixes of Lord of the Rings, the dwarven rings, most of them were recaptured by Sauron himself during his regrouping, or during this what's happening in the Second Age. There's a few that haven't been accounted for or lost. They're just lost. But of course, they still hold the demise over the entire dwarven race and everything. But what happens is he goes, like, once Sauron creates the One Ring, they start to corrupt, like I said, and there was a very important part about the Elven rings. He never touched them, but he had made a point when he's grabbing the human rings to take that mithril and then hold it over the.
I saw he didn't let. He's like Celeborn, right? Just put it in. He's like, no,
that's important
to me.
Because and you can see what Sauron was doing. He was making that thing, and like, all right, I'm gonna do this, and now you're gonna wear them, and I'll corrupt it. But the dwarven rings, he goes after them. He gathers them, because every ring has a kind of a special power. To compare like the three elven rings, and they all have a name too. But one's power over water, one's power over fire, one power over wind, I think, or earth. And I think Galadriel has. I think it's the wind. And the other guy from Lindon that's why he had the hand in the water and the fish came to him. So it was like power over like that kind of like that element. And then of course the dwarvens, even in that prologue, they desire greed. And so it takes a hold of them. And that's why like the Hobbit works so good too, because the power of gold, and that's how they're so easily influenced over greed and everything that kind of shapes their world. So he goes after them and corrupts all of them and gets those rings back. So Sauron is gaining power every time he grabs those rings, and I think that's what that's why I love, like, maybe it was a start of his plan that he let the elven rings do their thing, but he still has power over them, but not in the way that he corrupted the men that made it the ring race out of, and basically destroyed the elven or the dwarf civilizations, because that's when his master, he was like formulating this plan as he was doing it. So where it's like, man, I should have done something, but like that's why I love like that what is it, like a progression of his plan, and not just like, all right, well, Melicor's dead, I have this plan, I'm gonna make one ring, and I'm gonna no, it's something where it's like he knew what he wanted to do is power over flesh, not of the flesh, right? That's the whole theme of this. And I think it's brilliant. Like I really think it's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, he started at the beginning of the season 2, where he's like, okay, you all will worship me, and and they're like, oh no, we're not doing that. And he's like, okay, well, I'll find a different way to do it.
Exactly. And like I said, I love that he's by himself. Like he doesn't have an army. He doesn't have no followers. He's by himself, and he's like, all right, well, I'm gonna force see, Sauron's goal is to enslave everybody, and even orcs, like everybody, and that's why Adar and all that. That's why we're not. We want to be free people. We want to do all that stuff, and so Sauron's master plan is to like, all right, well, I'm gonna give power to everybody, but then I'm gonna be one who takes it and rules it myself. And like I said, and the fact that the elven rings worked and the tree grew back and put hope. And hope, because like Galadriel's kind of that's why Elrond sees right through it. He's like, you don't understand
exactly
the power he just gave you. You're using it, and again, that whole trope, like you're using it because it worked, but there's something else happening. If that what happened, Elrond's figuring this out, and that's why I like see those two split in this kind of way, because when we get to like the Lord of the Rings, it's like
it's a good split though.
Yes,
because there is one of pure virtue. Look, he had to taste the power and decided that wasn't for him. But he sees the corruption of all the other elves around. And he's looking like, wow, he gave it to I can't remember the elf's name to just get rid of it. But no, he couldn't quite do that.
Yeah.
And as soon as he saw him, he's like, oh, hey, I can throw that in the water.
He's the one character of virtue. And that's what makes his journey, especially when it's, oh no, he's gonna lead, and you're like,
like he was also badass too when he stole him and jumped off the edge.
Yes,
and went into
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Great integrity, great character building. I love the characters are all distinctly different in some way or another. Like they're putting a lot of time and effort into this.
They are, man, and I think that needs to be. I think that needs to be respected and set out there. And it's like don't just watch it. I mean, if you really are concerned about their handling this IP, watch the creators and listen to what they say. And they're, like I said, they're very respectful of the writings and the lore and things that even they're very respectful of Peter Jackson's work on it too.
Yes.
So before we wrap up and everything, there's one more point again that episode 4 gave us was Tom Bombadil. And the people who don't know who Tom Bombadil, personally, he was in the books, he was the most annoying character. But
thank you. Because when I started the Fellowship of the Ring, right? So you go through, it's like, I don't know, the first 50 pages is still in Hobbiton and everything.
Yes.
And then once they finally set out, then they're sidetracked for like another 20, 30, 40 pages or something with Tom Bombadil. And I hated every second of that. So I almost stopped. Because you have to hear his stupid songs. All this stuff. I did not like that at all.
So when I knew that he was coming into this Lord of the Rings of Power, I was like, oh, I mean, I hope they toned it, which they did. They toned it down. He sang under his breath, and he was very whimsical. But so everybody's like, who is this guy, right? And he was like, I was there when I saw the mountains grow. I was there. That's why the episode was called The Eldest, because he is the eldest. My theory, and this goes for like the deep cuts and everything, is the Eru, who is the god of Middle Earth, the one who created everything, Melikor, everybody and everything. If I'm not mistaken, like in the Silmarillion, there's a lot of creation of Middle Earth itself and all of the, the angels or whatever it was. There was a lot of conflict when Melikor came in, it made a bunch of conflict. There was wars and everything going on before they even made elves and men, right? There was a lot of gods fighting. Eru, who was like the one who created it all, which would be God in the Middle Earth. There was a point where he was like, I'm done with this. I'm just like, you guys fight it out and you'll deal with it. But at the end of the day, it'll all come back full circle. My theory is that he is Tom Bombadil and he's just living his life. He's just doing his things. He doesn't influence anything around. Because in the books of Lord of the Rings, when Frodo hands him the one ring, Tom Bombadil looks at it and he's like, oh, okay, here, and no influence over him. He had like no desire to even know what it was. He gave him guidance, but he never was like, this is nothing to me. You know what I mean? It doesn't affect me. It's just, this is like you guys battle it out. You know what I mean? It'll all be here at the end, like in another 5 ages or whatever. And that's my theory, is that we're seeing the human form of Eru, who is, that again, that's a kind of a deep cut.
That's a deep cut
on yeah, because no one can explain Tom Bombadil. No one can explain him. He's just like a somebody who lives in Middle Earth, and he's everything's going on, but he has no influence over it, and he doesn't put himself out, but he seems to have power. He seems to be able to conjure up anything he wants. You know what I mean? And but there again, in the Silmarillion, I think there was a point where he was like, I'm done with this crap. Yeah. You guys duke it out. I'm gonna go live for a little bit, and then maybe he'll come back and stop it all. And that's why, like Melkor was one of his angels, if you will, which decided to corrupt things. And Melkor is the one who made everything evil in Middle Earth. You know what I mean? So yeah, and he continuously battled Eru, and that's how the Silmarillion reads. So I want to leave you with that confusing anecdote, but I'm glad that Tom Bombadil is toned down so far. Yeah, so far. Yeah, because again, in the books, I even did the audio books, Brantley. Oh boy. It's even worse, man. It's even worse. But he's a mystery character in Middle Earth.
So essentially, he is Morgan Freeman and Bruce Almighty.
Yes,
it's like God's taking a vacation.
Yes, yeah. But basically, that's my theory. That's my theory, because again, if it's called the eldest, and he even said it in a thing, goes, I seen it all happen. I seen the mountains rise. I seen all that stuff, and it makes so much sense that and it actually kind of cool. Like if it ends up being that, I will never get confirmation over it, because but it's cool to have those theories out there and the speculations out there. Yeah, but we've got 4 episodes left. You know what I mean? Yeah. When the first 3 dropped, I was like, why 3? Well, we get it, because there are so many moving parts. And I love how that show does that, where it's not just concentrated on one aspect. It's like boom, boom, boom. And then we're backtracking. Now we're getting everybody's story up to speed. We got introduced to the other Harefoots, the Seers, they end up being, so on that note, there's the Harefoots, and there's 2 other like Hobbit ancestors, that ends up being the Hobbits, so I think the ones from the East are the ones that we saw on the show, ends up being Hobbits as we know it. Gollum would be the race of the ones we just saw. I think they're called the Seers.
Okay.
So
he is
we
one of
might
them.
even meet Smeagol towards
Smeagol?
the end.
I mean,
good.
Well, yeah, it'll be, if they do this like fast forward, or you could probably just put Return of the King on, and you have that prologue, and it's because the ring was lost for ages. It was lost for after Isildur was ambushed, and it went into the Anduin River. It was lost for like centuries.
Oh, okay.
Centuries, and then and then Smeagol found it, and yeah. But he's an ancestor of the desert people, desert Harfoots, or yeah.
Very interesting.
But so there it is, man. We could talk like this all. I could talk Lord of the Rings, just like Star Wars. And it's funny it's cool to do this, because it all, we're discovering this world too as we're seeing it. Exactly. Even me, I don't know everything about it. I've read as much as I can read. Like I said, I've read the Silmarillion. I even did the audio books to try to help me, and still have so many questions and so many things that you search for. And I think a lot of times I'm watching these shows for those answers too, to kind of like put a pin in that one. I'll put a pin in that one, but I'm here for it. And I'm one of those fans that if the story is there and they need to take something and enhance it, then by all, like Adar is not in the anywhere. He's a made up character for Rings of Power, just like the pale orc in the Hobbit was a made up character for the Hobbit, and it worked. Like it really, to me, it works great.
Well, again, you can't lift everything off of what Tolkien did. You do have to move the story online a little bit because, again, as much as we want everything to be verbatim of what it is in the books or the source material, every now and then you need something else to grab the story and push it along a little bit. And if it's one or two characters that enhances to it, look, neither you have Tolkien around,
right?
At one point or another, maybe he would have came up with something like that. So you got to give some interpretation to the people that have the hands.
Take some liberties. Take some liberties. And Tolkien was always about a great story. Exactly. And so,
far they're doing it.
I agree. I think so.
If you've got a bad guy, right? It's not just random orcs that happen to different things along the way. You've got actually someone that you can focus on and say like, oh, I hate that guy, and see what they're doing and sending out other people to do things.
Yeah.
But 100%. It's just like with Arwen, right? It's like she wasn't the one that took Frodo across the river.
No, it was Elrond.
Right. So
Elrond who did it.
So they switched that, but it made so much sense for that story and to tie everything together.
It like I said, knowing that, you're just kind of looking at this. If it works, it works. And I think that's where Tolkien. I think there's a smart creators like Peter Jackson knows how to, because I think there's no love interest, there's no love story going on in Lord of the Rings. It's just war. That's how Lord of the Rings reads. I mean, there's their Frodo's journey, but to have that and to like switch things around in that smart way, I think makes it more relatable for us. Again, we're living in this world that I never thought that it was a definitive world. It was always a living, breathing world where there's a lot of interpretations. There's so much more out there. And it's great to not have all the answers.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And it's So I'm looking
we can
forward
have
to
debates and a fight amongst ourselves on the internet.
Yes. I mean, people have points. Valid. I don't know. That's subjective. You know what I mean? But the my final thoughts on that is that a lot of the stuff, it's there. You just have to look for it. Exactly. Don't say it breaking stuff. Don't say Tolkien never meant this way. It's there. It's up to interpretation. It's there. And But we got 4 more episodes.
We do.
We got our 5th one this week, man. I can't wait because I hear that's gonna be a Galadriel and Adar team up, according to the previews.
Okay.
So that's going to be great. Yeah, because they have a common goal. They have a common enemy. So, yeah.
Well, it always works itself out that somehow, some way, we end up towards the end of the show. And, the thing that is that we have to give credit to our sponsor. And our sponsor for tonight and almost every episode of Getting Medieval will be the Tashi Station Emporium, which, let me tell you something, if you do not have these figure stands, you are missing out. There's other people out there that do stands, and I got to tell you something, the care and the point that comes in, and like Scott Solo over on the other cast would say, they're the only stands that will hold your characters up right. great stands, and we thank him so much for being our sponsor of the show. And again, we're going to put a link in the description so you can head over there and you can check out that. And if there's anything in there, hey, purchase it. You'd be surprised and everything. I know there's some McFarlane Lord of the Ring figures out there. Hey, McFarlane's don't stand well. They need some good stands. So
I have all the Diamond Select ones, all of them.
There you go.
I love
There you go. So we've got it all in from all your different brands and lines and everything. There's a stand for that. So we thank them for being the sponsor of Getting Medieval. And one thing before we end the show and everything else like that, there's going to be a test next week. So you better pay attention.
Yes.
So I'll leave it to Dr. Brentley. Your last final thoughts on the night?
This is fun. I love the Lord of the Rings. I really got into it with the Peter Jackson movies. I tried to read it earlier, and it was very difficult. Once I saw the movies, then I was able to put some of these faces and looks, and then it all comes alive in a different way. And so I'm looking forward to this, getting a little deeper into it, finding out a little bit more about what you know about this stuff. Help us along. But I'm
my
loving
best.
this show.
Cool.
Yeah,
It's great.
I know in the coming weeks, we're going to have this Middle Earth 101 kind of thing we're going to do. And we're going to take some certain things to catch up some people that probably don't know a lot of the backstories or places so they can follow along with the series. If you don't have, it's the first time watching it, or you don't have a real empirical knowledge of it, well, we're going to try to help you along for that. Yeah. But as always, Darth Moocher can be found at the Sorlek Digest podcast channel. And that's on YouTube, and there's a Wednesday night thing, and we're going to cut a little intro in that'll show you the schedule for Wednesday nights. But if you're not packing your Wednesday nights with us and with them, you're making a terrible mistake. So,
and also don't forget to promote your own show, Toy Box Chronicles. Right,
again, obviously, but that'll be up in the trades and down in descriptions. The best part about it, this will be a weekly show, so we're going to keep this rolling. And again, next week is episode 5. So again, homework lesson is to go over the 4 episodes, because there might be a test next week for that. So you never know what we're going to do here.
I love it. I love it.
And the most important thing to do is to like, comment, and subscribe to the Shadow Nose Network, and then pop over and like, comment, and subscribe at the Sorlek Digest podcast channel.
Yes.
So
we love comments.
If you can just put it in, whatever it is, good or bad, we read it all.
Hey, keep the conversation going. Let your get your opinions in on no matter what, from toys, Star Wars to this, because I think everybody enjoys IPs. The way they enjoy it, and it's great to have a conversation and talk about it. Again, it kind of enforces your own knowledge on it, or learning some stuff. I learn every day, especially in Middle Earth. Every single day I'm learning something. So by all no means am I any much of an expert. But I do my research. I really try. If I don't know, then I'm okay. Let's find this out. So if you have that same issue or want to be in part of it, comment, because we will be in there and we will answer back.
Yeah, and also if you've got questions, put them down here, and we will try and answer them. Either right there in the comments, or we can make a topic of it on the next show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I don't look like a dwarf for nothing. Let's go.
Well, with that said and everything, we will see you next week. Thanks for watching. And hey, anything that you want to drop it in the comments for us. Thank you guys for tuning in.